Hey there, this is Anthony from mycodeteacher.com, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a basic Hello World application for the iPhone. In case you haven't already done so, you can download the iPhone SDK by opening up your browser and going to developer.apple.com. This will bring you to the Apple Developer Connection website. This is split up into two parts, one for iPhone developers and one for Mac developers. I'm going to click on Visit iPhone Dev Center, and this will bring you to a page that you can download the iPhone SDK from. You do need to be logged in with an Apple Developer Connection account, but it is free and it doesn't take very long to create one, so if you haven't done that, you can do so pretty quickly. You can see as of today, which is March 17th, Apple's added a new section for the 3.0 version of the iPhone SDK, but I'm not going to be using that. It's still in beta, and it's not going to be out for probably a few more months. So please download 2.2.1. When doing this, please be sure to have the latest version of Mac OS X installed on your Mac. Otherwise, you will run into problems when trying to create applications or trying to create Xcode projects that are iPhone applications, because you'll run into version compatibility problems. So please be sure to have the latest version of OS X on your Mac, which at this point I believe is 10.5.6. So once you've got that, you can download the iPhone SDK and install. It's a pretty basic installation. You just basically click next a few times and wait for Xcode to be installed and other tools like Interface Builder and the iPhone SDK itself, and you're ready to go. So now I'm going to go to Xcode here, navigate to File, New Project, and so here we've got a list of templates that you can choose from for building or creating a new project. The first one is a navigation-based application. This template will include an instance of UI navigation controller in your project or in your application. A UI navigation controller is a class or an object that allows you to create an application that has sort of a drill-down hierarchy style to it. You've seen that in the iPod application that's on both iPod Touches and iPhones, where let's say you choose first an artist, then you drill down into albums, and then songs, and selecting a song will drill down even further to the now playing screen, and all the while you're choosing items from the various table views, the application is drilling down into or pushing into a new view. So navigation-based application will set that up for you. The next is an OpenGL application. This will include the OpenGL framework into your project. OpenGL is a graphics library, a very powerful graphics library actually, that will allow you to create games for the iPhone. So if you're looking to create an iPhone game, you can choose this template and save yourself a few steps of adding the OpenGL framework. Next is a tab bar application. You've also seen this with the iPod application for the iPhone. A tab bar application, as you might guess from the name, includes an instance of UI tab bar controller, which basically puts a tab bar on the bottom of the screen, a black one, with various tabs as defined by you, and choosing a tab or pushing on a tab brings up a different screen depending on the tab chosen. So if you're looking for an application that does a few very specific tasks or needs to be broken down into different parts, tab bar application would make sense. The next is a utility application. This is pretty simple. Basically, it's an application that has two main views. So you start off with one view, and then pushing on a button, which usually is an iInfo button, makes the application do literally a 180 for the graphic effect and brings up a new view. So if you have an application that does two very specific tasks, you can choose this and flip back and forth, or allow users to flip back and forth between views depending on the task they want to do. The next is a view-based application. This is the second simplest from the template list that we have here. A view-based application creates a project that has only an instance of UI window and UI view. So basically you're starting out with almost nothing, really just one blank view that you can add onto. And the last, which is the simplest, is a window-based application. So this will create a project that has nothing but a blank instance of UI window. And from there, you can add on various UI objects depending on what you are looking to create with your iPhone application. So I'm going to choose that so you can see how the building up process works when creating an iPhone application. I'm going to name this Hello World here. Save it to my desktop. And this will create a folder that will include everything we need for the application bundle. And here we have the Xcode window, the main Xcode window for our Hello World application. First on the left here, we've got a groups and files listing. This is, as you might guess, just a list of all the files in the application bundle. So first, we've got a drop-down for the project itself, Hello World. This is split up into some folders Apple has already put for us: classes, other sources, resources, frameworks, and products, which is the target or the application itself. I like to use this hierarchy here for organization. It doesn't matter, it's not necessary, but it does help when you have a lot of files added to your application and it starts to get confusing. So it never hurts to organize everything based on what you see here. So any new classes that you create, you should probably put here. This I never really touch. This is just for the prefix header file and the main file. I'll talk about what that is in a minute. Resources is for anything else, so basically not code files like images, interface builder files, anything like that. Then you've got a frameworks drop-down. I'll explain what the various frameworks we have here are. So anytime you want to add a new framework, it makes sense to put it here, but if you add a new framework, it actually is automatically listed here. And products, which is the application itself. So the application will be built into this file here. And you've got a few other things to target. This is basically the target for where everything will be built into. Kind of goes hand in hand with the .app file. The executable and other things like errors and warnings. So when building your project, if you find any errors, or if the compiler finds any errors or any warnings, it'll list them here for you conveniently. So basically the only place you'll really be adding files and mostly be dealing with is in the top portion here under the Hello World application dropdown. So I want to begin by explaining what the various frameworks are. So the first on the list here is the Core Graphics framework. Core Graphics is a library or a framework written by Apple, which provides you with some very powerful graphics classes that allow you to do various things regarding the graphics portion of your application. So things dealing with images and stuff like that. So anything that is kind of advanced but has to deal with the interface, you might want to use the Core Graphics framework. Next is Foundation. Foundation is extremely important. Foundation framework includes objects that allow you to control all the back-end stuff in your application. So here you'll find things like arrays or the NSArray class, strings, data management, anything like that that is going on behind the application is completely crucial, but at the same time the user won't directly see or they won't see it in that fashion. Rather, they'll see it as presented by your interface. The last we have here is the UI Kit framework, and this is a framework that bundles all the user interface elements that Apple has already written for you to allow you to create an interface for your application. So here you'll find things like UI label, UI table view, UI view, anything that has to deal with the user interface you'll find included in the UI Kit framework. Next, we'll check out the info.plist file. This is bundled with every application. This is basically just a list of properties specific to your application. So you can modify these depending on pieces of data that are specific to your application. So for example, the bundle display name. So whatever goes here or whatever you put here will show up as the title of the application when it's bundled onto or installed onto an actual iPod Touch or iPhone. So by default, Xcode plugs in Hello World, which is basically this token here is replaced with Hello World, but you can double click and change this. And now that will be what shows up on an actual iPhone as the title of your application. The icon file, the icon that you want to show up with your iPhone application, you can fill in the file name. You will have to drag it into the bundle, preferably the resources folder here on the left. But once you do that, you can fill in the name of the file, and that will be the icon that shows up when installing your application on an actual iPod Touch or iPhone. And here you've got the main nib file. This is pretty important. This is the interface builder file or the zip file that Xcode uses as a default interface builder file. So when your application first launches, Xcode's going to go into this property here, and based on what you have filled in here, is going to grab that appropriate file from the bundle, so in this case main window.zib, and use that as a default interface builder file. So when your application launches, whatever's going on in the main window interface builder file is going to go on at the start of your application. So basically you can think of this as your default user interface or your startup user interface. Some other important files, this is just a prefix. This includes the two main frameworks, Foundation and UIKit. And then main, anyone who knows C programming knows that everything begins with the execution of the main function. So because Objective-C is based on C, you do still have the execution of the main function, but this is already set up for you, so you really shouldn't have to touch this. You got a few lines of code here that basically get your application going. The UI application main function is used to start your application, and then from there a long chain of events basically are triggered that get your application going. So like the NS run loop, for instance, is started, and just a long list of things like that basically all start here. And so again, you won't have to touch this. This already works. You really just have to deal with your own subclasses and the interface. All right, so now I want to talk about the Hello World app delegate.h and .m files. So whenever you create an iPhone application in Xcode, Xcode automatically creates a subclass, an NSObject subclass called the app delegate class, or the application delegate. And the class name is automatically determined by your application name plus app delegate at the end. So the app delegate basically is meant to control your application on a really grand scale. So it makes sense to use this class to control your application, or to get everything running. Any important tasks should probably be done through the app delegate, so it makes sense to kind of keep everything in this class. It's called the app delegate because some specific events that can happen while your application is running, the application will notify the app delegate class when those specific events have taken place. So I'm going to go to the .m file for a minute. Don't be scared. If you don't understand this, it's fine. I'll explain it in a minute. But I just want to show you that you've got here a method called application did finish launching. This method is automatically called when the application finishes launching. So UI application, an instance of UI application, is automatically created when your application launches, and that instance of UI application is the running instance of your application itself. And so that UI application instance tells the Hello World app delegate class that it has finished launching. And so it sends a message to the Hello World app delegate class, and any code you have in here will automatically be executed. So NSLog is a function that just logs an instance of NSString to the console. And so now this text, when the application launches, will automatically be printed to the console. So I'll build that just so you can see that here. So right now everything's being compiled, put together, the target application is being built. And so now, once the application finishes launching, you'll see here, application is finished launching. So again, that text is logged to the console automatically. So again, this method is automatically called and the code inside of it is automatically executed. I'll show you in a little bit how the connections are made so that this is all possible. But for now, just know that the Hello World app delegate, when you create a new project, is automatically assumed to be the class that receives notifications when certain events take place. So I'm going to go to the documentation here for a minute. Help documentation. And I'm going to show you what other events will trigger, or what other notifications your Hello World app delegate will receive when certain events happen. So type in UI application delegate, and here is all the different events that the app delegate class will be notified about when they happen. So application will change status bar orientation, did change status bar orientation, will resign active, will become active, things like that. You saw this already. Application did finish launching, application will terminate. So this one, for example, will be executed right before your application quits out. So if a user is running your application right before, or when they press the home button right before your application closes, any code in this method will be executed. So that's good for maybe saving application data so that when the user reopens the application, it looks exactly the same as when they closed it, something like that. So now you might be asking yourself, well, what is the UI application delegate? What did we just look at here? That is a protocol. A protocol is a list of methods that another class can implement. So the UI application delegate is a protocol. And the UI application instance knows that those methods should be implemented by its delegate. So we're going to look at how that's all set up, but just for now know that Xcode has created a situation where the Hello World app delegate class has been set to be the receiver of all notifications. And the UI application knows that whoever its delegate is should implement those methods. So when the application finishes launching, the instance of UI application sends a message to the Hello World app delegate, and it knows how to send the message based on how the methods are outlined in the UI application delegate protocol. So again, the protocol is a list of methods that the UI application knows should or could be implemented by its delegate. So most of those, if not all of those, are optional. In some cases, protocol methods are not optional. But in this case, for the UI application delegate, all those methods you saw listed are optional. So you can see here that application did or will terminate is not implemented here. So the UI application checks to see if its delegate has code implemented for that method, and if it does, it tells the delegate to execute that code, and if it doesn't do anything when that specific event happens. And so this is very powerful when dealing with application-wide events. So Apple has set up this situation very well so that it's very easy for developers to know when something like the application finishes launching or is about to quit can happen. And so you really don't have to do any work. You just have to type in the code that you want your program to do when those events happen. Alright, so now let's talk about what we've actually got here in the code. So the first line you'll see in every .h file imports a reference to the UIKit framework. UIKit/UIKit.h includes Foundation. So you don't need another import statement that says Foundation / So this line is included in this file here. And so now importing that imports all the classes that are bundled with Foundation and UIKit. So anything you want to do with Apple's already defined classes in their framework, you can do. So now, next you've got here on line 11 is the interface. The interface, first you have the keyword at interface, followed by a space, followed by the title of your class, which again is Hello World App Delegate. And then we've got here a space, a colon, a space, and then the Hello World App Delegate superclass. So if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming, you have something called inheritance. And so anything that exists in the NSObject class also exists in the Hello World App Delegate class. So it basically is like a child to the NSObject class. It inherits from it. And so anything you can do with NSObject, you can also do with Hello World App Delegate without retyping or cutting and pasting all the code defined in the NSObject class. And then we have here in brackets the protocols that the Hello World App Delegate class conforms to. And automatically plugged in is the UI Application Delegate, again, which is the list of those events or methods that will be executed when certain events happen. After closing the bracket, protocol is obviously not mandatory. If it just so happens that your class doesn't need to implement any protocols, then that won't be there. You'll never not inherit from at least NSObject, because NSObject is the root to all Apple classes. So everything inherits from NSObject, and NSObject is a very well-built class that does or hides from you a lot of the back-end developing. So you can do things like create an instance of your class, and everything is set up for you without having to do it manually or typing in the code or writing the code for it. So again, be sure to always inherit from NSObject, and if you choose to create a new class, it automatically will inherit from NSObject. Apple knows that developers are not going to subclass nothing. It just doesn't make sense. You're basically just creating work for yourself. So now after the protocol, we have an open curly brace, and here you have all your instance variables. So UI window, the window, this is an instance variable, and I'll talk about what this is connected to. We have something called interface builder outlets, and this is connected to an instance of UI window that exists in the main window interface builder file. So after instance variables, you have a close bracket. Then you have here methods, any methods that you want that are specific to your class. So output some text. Maybe we have a method that does some text outputting to the console, anything like that. And then in the same area here, you have property declarations. Properties are specific to Objective-C or programming Objective-C under Apple. There's actually no such thing as a property, but it may seem that there is because Apple does a very good job of basically cramming it right in there with Objective-C programming under Apple. Properties are basically public instance variables. So by default, a class's instance variables are private to that class. So the window instance variable is not accessible by outside classes. It's only accessible to the Hello World App Delegate class. But Apple has created something called properties, which basically allows other objects to come in and gain access to the window instance variable. So here we have app property, non-atomic retain. These are keywords. I'm not going to go over what these mean right now. Just know that these mean something about how the Hello World App Delegate deals with its instance variable, depending on what it's connected to and how other classes ask for it and stuff like that. Then IB outlet, this is just a keyword that just tells Xcode that this specific instance variable is an outlet to an instance of a class that will be created in Interface Builder or in an Interface Builder file. Then the name of the class UI window, and then the instance variable itself. And then we have the @end keyword. This ends the interface. So now let's look at the implementation. Of course, we implement the .h file, or I'm sorry, we import the .h file. Then we implement keyword @implementation followed by a space followed by the name of the class, and then the implementation is for implementing any methods that your class needs to implement. So, for example, the application did finish launching method. Here we've got a keyword at synthesize. This synthesizes or sets up two methods that allow window to become a property. So when you really look at what's going on here, there is no such thing as a public instance variable. Before the newer versions, before macOS 10.5, you had to basically make variables public by yourself, writing your own code. So this keyword at synthesize tells Xcode, when compiling application, to basically create two methods, one that allows outside classes to set window, one that allows it to grab it, depending on how you've set up property in the .h file. So this is eventually transforms into and maybe we should change this to, just so there's no confusion between the instance variable and the local variable. So again, a property there's no such thing as a property. Essentially, a property is just a way of making your instance variables public or accessible to other classes. So when another class asks for the window instance variable of the hello world.delegate class, what it's essentially doing is it's calling to this method here, and this method returns the instance that it's asking for, which is window. And the same for setting it. There's something called key value coding, and something when you want to make an instance variable public, you need to basically make it key value coding compliant, and what that means is it follows a protocol which is a very specific way of creating these methods. So the standard is to make the method that will return the instance variable, just name it the instance variable itself, and the method that returns, the method that allows you to set the instance variable, just make it set followed by the name of the instance variable using camel casing. So window and set window. And that's the way it'll always be when dealing with properties and key value coding. So just know that the setter and the getter methods are the name of the instance variable and set followed by the name of the instance variable. So don't worry about that too much, because again, you'll never have to deal with it, or you won't have to deal with it when you're starting off. It's kind of all there for you. And so when another class wants to get the window instance variable, instead of saying hello world app delegate instance window, so this would return the window, instead shorthand using a period, the hello world app delegate class will return the window instance variable. So that might be a little confusing right now. Don't worry about it, because just know that a property is a public instance variable, so an instance variable that other classes have access to, and you can get properties or set them using a period. So the instance of the class followed by a period followed by the name of the instance variable that you want to deal with. So now we have, like I said, the application did finish launching method, and so you can implement code here. By default, we have window make key invisible. This tells the instance of UI window to become the key window and become visible on the screen. And then dealloc, this is called when hello world app delegate is deallocated or released from memory. This will happen when your application quits. And so window is released. This tells the window to basically clear itself from memory. And then super dealloc, super is a keyword that means your super class. So since this class inherits from NSObject, this line right here will basically be substituted with the code that exists in the dealloc method of NSObject. So now let's look at the interface builder file. Okay, so here we've got a few windows and panels here. The first we want to take a look at is the instances window. This is a list of all the instances of various objects that you have or that your interface builder will create when it's basically when it's opened in your application. So the first thing you notice is files owner. Files owner is basically the owner of the interface builder file. So whatever class owns the interface builder file, or whatever class will use the interface builder file as itself, so to speak. So this here is the UI application instance. So you saw in the info.plist file that main window is the default interface builder file. And what that means is the UI application will assume that main window.zib is its interface builder file. And so it does with that what it needs to, which is to display it on screen, and it will basically open it, and upon opening it, these instances will be created. So this is not really an instance. This is an instance, but it's not created when the interface builder file is opened. It's assumed to be already created. So this here is an instance of an object that's already created, and that's the owner of the interface builder file. First responder, this is the UI interface element that basically is active when your application first launches. So that is also not an instance. These next two are. So you might have been wondering this whole time, well, we have created a Hello World app delegate class, we've filled in some code, but doesn't it actually have to be instantiated for the code to actually work, or for us to actually use it? And the answer is yes, it does. And this is where it's instantiated. So in the main window.zib file, an instance of the Hello World app delegate class is created. So an instance is basically a working, functioning copy of that object. So basically it brings that outline of that object to life and allows you to actually use it and communicate with it and execute code listed under it and do stuff with its instance variables and everything like that. So it's basically taking your dead object and bringing it to life. So now here is an instance of that. So if you look here, this is the inspector panel, and this particularly is the connections portion of the inspector panel. And we've got two listings here, the outlets and the referencing outlets. Under outlets, we have here the connection made to the instance variable window. So earlier we saw that the Hello World app delegate class has an instance variable called window, which is an instance of the UI window class. But nowhere in code was an instance of UI window actually created and set to that instance variable. Well, here that happens. So Interface Builder knows that we want to use this instance variable window in the Interface Builder file based on the fact that we use the keyword IBOutlet. So if we go to the .h file, we see IBOutlet. This actually also should be here. So Interface Builder looks at the Hello World app delegate.h file, sees, oh, we have an IBOutlet here, and it lists it here as an Interface Builder outlet. And so basically what happens here is a connection is made. So I'm going to close this just so there's no confusion. This is the instance of UI window that we created. That was done, or you can do that yourself by going to the library and dragging UI window to the instances window. And so what that does is that creates an instance of the UI window class. Again, this is basically a live copy of the UI window class. And so you can communicate with it, use it, display it, whatever you want. So I'm going to delete this. That was just to show you how that works. So what Interface Builder has already done for us is it's basically dragged from here to here and connected that to the window. And so now what that means is this instance of UI window that is alive in Interface Builder is directly connected to this instance variable window. So this window points to this window here. And again, we did that by right-clicking on Hello World app delegate and dragging to window, clicking connecting window. You can also do that by going to the connections panel and dragging from the circle to that window. So now, whatever we do in code to this instance variable is done to this window here. Now, underneath that, we've got the connection to the files owner delegate. So, like I said, files owner here is the instance of UI application that is your application itself. And so, what Xcode has done, or Interface Builder has done, is it's made a connection to the Hello World app delegate and it's connected the delegate outlet. So, delegate is an instance variable that belongs to the UI application. And so, the UI application tells its delegate, which we just set, to execute code as defined in the UI application delegate protocol when certain events happen. So when the application finishes launching, the files owner checks to see if it has a delegate set. It sees that it's been set to this instance of Hello World app delegate, and then it tells the Hello World app delegate to execute any code that it has implemented in the application did finish launching method. And so that's how that all works together. So now what we're actually going to do is we are actually going to create an instance of UI label and put Hello World on our screen. So double click on the window here, and as I said, it's a blank window. There's nothing on it. That's for us to do. And so now if you go to the library window, if you don't already have that open, you can go to Tools, Library. And this will bring up the library window, and this is all the objects that exist in the UIKit framework. So any interface element that you want to put in your application using Interface Builder, you can do by dragging it from the library window either onto a super view or the instances window. So we're going to drag it directly onto the window, and that will make an instance of UI label. So here we've got label, UI label, a little description here. So we're going to drag this onto the window. And so now what we've done is we've created an instance of UI label and we've set its super view to this instance of UI window. So all these all these UIKit elements are subclasses of UI view. So basically that just means is a view, a block, a window, something like that. Just basically a block of area on the screen that can display something. So UI label is a very specific subclass of UI view, which is meant for displaying text in a block. So I'm just going to center this, layout alignment, align vertical center, and horizontal center. And so now, in case you didn't catch what I did before, I centered it. In the inspector panel, you've got the attributes portion of it, and this allows you to modify some elements or some properties or attributes, as the panel says, specific to this interface or to this UIKit framework element. So UI label, we have things like the text that it displays, where it truncates, if it's left aligned, right aligned, or centered, the color, things like that. So we're going to fill in the text here. You can do that by double clicking, or you can just do it directly here. Hello World. Okay, that didn't. Okay, that should have worked, but it didn't. It's all right. All right. And so now we've got a label that says Hello World. So if we build our application, save everything, Xcode's going to recompile. And so now the simulator launches, and we have, in a second here, our application running. And so there you see, Hello World is displayed on the screen. And so here in the outside is the instance of UI window that we saw in Interface Builder, and here is the instance of UI label, which we set to display the text Hello World. So all of this can be done with code. And so UI label has a property which is called the text property, and that is the text that it should draw out onto the screen when it needs to be displayed. So we set the text in Interface Builder, so this will all be broken down and basically transformed into setting the text of this instance of UI label to hello world with an exclamation point. But again, we can also do that with code. So first, we're going to go into Xcode and we're going to create another instance variable, which also is an IB outlet, and make it a UI label instance. Hello world label. And so now, when we save this, Interface Builder has automatically already updated, and it now knows that the Hello World App Delegate class has two instance variables that are Interface Builder outlets. One is window and one is Hello World label. So now if we go to Interface Builder again and we open up the window, we can right click and drag, or actually I'm going to go to the connections panel so you can see that here. Now we have another outlet, Hello World label. We can drag and connect, and so now that instance variable Hello World label is connected to this label. So now we can go to the .m file, application did finish launching method, and we can set the text that we want the Hello World label to display. Text, you can see Xcode already knows that the text property exists. Please be sure to begin all strings with the @ symbol. We're not dealing with a char data type here, which is one character. We're actually dealing with an instance of NS string. So the @ symbol and then 2 quotation marks is a shorthand way of saying with string. So just know that when you fill it in, when you shorthand setting some text to an S-string instance using this shorthand method, which is called syntactic sugar, just know that it's converted somewhere to creating an instance of NS string and then setting that to the text property. So text takes an instance of NS string. So you couldn't let's say you couldn't pass 0 to the text property because 0 is an integer and text requires an instance of NS string. So be sure to know that everything has to be everything has to match and be data compliant. So we're going to repeat the effect that we created before and set the text property of our Hello World label to Hello World. So if we don't do this, it'll display label. But since we're doing this, right as the application finishes launching, this code will be executed and the text will read Hello World again. So just so you can see that if we comment that out so that that code isn't executed and relaunch, we'll actually see label. Another property that we can modify is the color of the text. So there's a class that Apple has created called UI Color, and this is just a way of passing around colors. So we're going to call the UI Color class method. A class method is a method that you can call to the actual class itself. You don't have to call to an instance of the class. UI Color red color. This is a method that exists in the UI Color class. You can see that in the documentation. If we look up UI Color, we can see red color. The plus sign in front means it's a class method, so instead of creating an instance of UI Color and then saying red color, we can actually just call red color to the UI Color class itself, and this red color class method will return an instance of UI Color that stores the color red. And so the text color property will read out from the UI Color class what color it stores. And so when we build this, you can see that the text is now red. Now, as I mentioned before, these are properties. The period here implies that we're using a property or setting a property, but we can also do that the old-fashioned way which would be set text color. UI color, red color. So this here is a method. This is a method call. So we're sending the method or a message to hello world label, and that message is set text color followed by an instance of UI color, which is the color of the text that we want to set it to. But this is the same as this here. So this line is ultimately converted to the line that we just typed beneath this. So again, if we build our application, we have hello world in red text. I'm Anthony from mycodeteacher.com. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you next time.